Hi, everybody, and welcome to another Kalicube Tuesdays. Today with Nik Ranger, the delightful, the wonderful, and the super-duper intelligent, who's going to talk about something that I had never thought about before, semantically driven site architecture. And today, we're going to give it a go with a slide deck. So anybody listening in on audio, either this is going to be brilliant because we're going to describe it so well, or it's going to be a bit confusing. Either way, you get the song.
It's going to be interesting. It is definitely going to be interesting. So anyone who's listening out there who doesn't kind of get it, I'm really, really sorry, just as a little caveat right now. But I'll do my best to just basically describe what's on the slides, and I'll make them available, of course, after this.
Ooh, and we can even make it available on the withjasonbarnard.com website, all part of the mad Kalicube experiments about doing a Disney on our brand SERP. But before we get started, the song. A quick hello and we're good to go. Welcome to the show, Nik Ranger.
Wonderful to be here. Thank you so much, Jason, for having me. I feel super lucky. The last time we did this, we were in London, of all places, and also my first time in London. So super happy to be on the show again, and really excited to get into it.
Right, yeah, and last time we were in London and we were singing, I think we were singing Happy Birthday to Peter Mead.
Yeah.
Who, interesting enough, intriguingly enough, and surprisingly enough, was the last person who booked a ticket for this on Eventbrite. So I assume Peter is there. Hello, Peter. Welcome. Glad to have you on board.
Hey, Peter. Thank you so much for spending the evening with me and just kind of like hearing my thoughts before this presentation as well. So yeah, he's a good friend.
Right. So he's hiding out in the background somewhere.
Oh, no, he's gone home. It's 1 a.m. here. For anyone listening, I'm in Melbourne, Australia, and of course, like it is 1 a.m. here. But again, super excited. Doesn't matter.
Ranger, the person that I always see at 1 o'clock in the morning, because you're the only person in Australia willing to get up and stay up all night to do these webinars at US and European times. Anyway. We always start off with a little brand SERP. We've got your brand SERP here, and I was terribly pleased that you've got a mini see results about. There you go, Nik Ranger, and you're an event, apparently.
Awesome.
So Nik Ranger, you've got the Twitter account, and you've got the Kalicube entity using the Wordlift plugin, and on the right-hand side, we've got Nik Ranger, who's an event. And what's really interesting, I've put big red arrows for people who can't see this, who are listening on audio. We've got location Kalicube, and it points to Kalicube's head office and the source. And what's interesting there, if we go to the next slide, is that it's citing a source for that information, which is a web fact, what Google is calling Webfacts. And if you can't see this graph, and I do now realize that criticizing Nik for having brought along a slide deck, I'm doing exactly the same thing. So fair dues, we're both just as unreasonable about audio listeners as each other. But what we can see is a blue line that goes straight across at 60% curated knowledge, which is basically the human curated knowledge that Google has built over the last few years. The red line, which goes straight at 40% until May, and then it drops off sharply down to 25%. And that's free base entries. And then the web facts, which is basically what the machine has found online and decided is true and cites sources for more often than not, but not always, has gone along at 4% and has suddenly leapt up to 12% since May, which means, in my humble opinion, that Google's letting the machine loose. And the machine is now gathering these web facts. And if you didn't have an entity home and you weren't building up Google's understanding of your entity and all the attributes of that entity, hi, Peter Mead, by the way, you should be now, because Google is letting the machine decide what the facts about your company, your business, your person, your book, your podcast are. And it's putting these web facts in those knowledge panels. Time to take control, because over the last 2 months, the number of web facts in knowledge panels, or the percentage of web facts in knowledge panels, has doubled, tripled almost. I thought you'd find that exciting. You look not as excited as I had hoped.
To be honest, it just could be the early morning hours, and also for the fact that I'm a little bit embarrassed. I have not paid attention to my personal brand whatsoever, and maybe like more worried about like my clients.
Right, well, I more than make up for the fact that you don't look after yours, because I look after mine far too much. So 1 a.m. in Australia. Nik is looking surprisingly bright and cheerful. And she's going to talk to us about semantically driven site architecture, which I can't even say. What I did like about this is how excited you were about this topic. And I really don't know what it means. And I purposefully didn't look it up, purposely didn't research it, because I think it's all original research that you've done yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a few little new concepts that, to be honest, like I think I was talking to Dixon Jones before, and I think he sort of said it's quite well, like to stop thinking about keywords and to start thinking in entities. And I think like thinking about like how to organize your thoughts and information like that. Yeah, I have put together like I guess like a little bit of new information. So yeah, I will get into it. So yes, we can see those slides there. Awesome.
Sure. I mean, I love the point about thinking in entities. I mean, I think about entities as in the brand SERP and how Google represents, how Google understands the entity. And I tend to focus on the kind of high level entities like people and brands and companies and books. Whereas there are within any brand and with any person, loads, or with any person's environment, loads and loads of entities to be thinking about. And we should actually be thinking holistically, and I hate the word, but I'm going to say it again, holistically, about entities around an entity in order to be able to explain ourselves. And you're now applying that to site architecture. Now, I'll let you get on with your carry on with your delightful presentation. If I think this might not be clear to audio listeners, I will interrupt and describe in my finest prose what we're seeing.
I have no doubt. Awesome. Thanks, Jason. All right, well, just a little bit of information about me. My name is Nik Ranger. I'm a senior technical lead at Studio Hawk. I also love to work with Peter Meads with SEMrush for Australian Search Marketing Academy. And I'm also the chair of SEO Collective here in Melbourne, Australia. And that's basically just a volunteer-run initiative where we basically just want to share information and not have site owners sort of like, be scared off with a paywall or anything like that. Basically just a good collaboration of really, really awesome SEOs and PPCs and other experts that just want to volunteer their time to be able to help out people. So that's what SEO Collective is. And just a couple of other nice things about me. And also, I'm an owner of a dog, so a lot of this will be kind of like dog related as I sort of like organize this information.
We have a picture of a dog called Poppy surrounded by the biggest, reddest, cartooniest hearts in the universe.
Yeah, she's absolutely beautiful. She's a greyhound, so that's all you need to know. All right, let's get into it.
Greyhound.
She is.
Which is kind of strange to say, yeah.
All right. So also for anyone who is curious, or probably not at all, but there's a lot of Simpsons memes in here because I like Simpsons memes. So if there's another reason to go and like check out the deck after this, check out the memes associated with this.
Homer Simpson, rib watch.
All right. So the concept is I suppose like site architecture. And the methodology is using like semantically driven data to inform us what structures we can build with that. So that's kind of like the concept that I'm really wanting to start to look at and break down. So essentially like using like a semantic approach to solving business problems. Like I'm thinking like we can be able to manage data in a way that's optimized for capturing as much real estate within relevant search intent associated with pages across our site. And then of course, then we can then design it for the user experience. So conceptually, this is really what I'm wanting to discuss today. So taking a massive step back, why do this at all? And really that's just because like Google Shift is shifting away from answers to journeys. And of course there was that wonderful Google post I'm just citing here. Again, this is like, it's the how intent is redefining the market funnel. So essentially like Google uses AI to be able to better understand language that users use when they search. So essentially like Google and Bing are becoming like the semantic search engines, and to really like figure out like that how that can be done is that it basically is just recognizing that people find information from all different angles, and it just kind of like goes through what that looks like. So again, like I basically just took one of the examples from that blog and just kind of like broke it down. So with this one, when you're just sort of like looking for queries and things like that, you're going to start off with a pretty like discovery search, unless you really know what you're looking for.
Just to cut in there, two things. Number one is the search is pressure in my head. Why do I feel my head is heavy? Headphones, headache. And we have a Simpsons meme, and it is completely not necessary to understand the slide, but it's lovely.
It's hilarious. I put them in there mainly to make me laugh. So again, like,
and it works.
The teams are here, but again, like when we're just thinking about this now, this is a transactional journey that I'm just using as an example here. But again, like when you're sort of first starting to look at it, like, you know, why is my head heavy? And, you know, headphones and headaches and things like that. So you're pretty much like having a bit of a pain point already. So that's kind of like a more of like in that informational journey, like I'm having an issue. So then like your search starts to get a little bit more qualified as you're learning more information about like what the symptoms are, or like maybe what you're needing. And so maybe it's actually the headphones that are intrinsically the problem. So now your intent is going to change from informational to commercial, because essentially like you're just kind of like starting to really qualify that a little bit more. So so now like you might be looking like, okay, well, like I'm just going to get some headphones. So, you know, what are some you know, like cheap wireless headphones that I can find? Or maybe I should kind of like get something a little bit more higher end. So what are some good reviews about like a brand that I'm aware of?
Right, and interestingly here you're showing videos, which indicates that Google are actually showing multiple ways of consuming this information and informing oneself. You've got those really simple blue links, and then you've got these videos where it's saying, does it suck? Looking at cheap wireless headphones and what are the best headphones for $20. And all of these are on YouTube, offering this kind of viewing experience, multimedia thing that Google's going for.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thanks, Jason. That again, that really just highlights that there are so many different ways that people go through and be able to access information. And just from an organic standpoint, just accessing the SERP, search engine results page, or accessing YouTube is generally like, you know, places that people go to be able to find more qualified information. So this process is like using like deep learning models to really provide that contextual and relevant results to user queries, as it's sort of getting a little bit more qualified. Like now I'm like understanding a little bit more about like what I now need to do. So you know, like headphone brand A, B, C, like now I'm actually like thinking like, okay, actually I want something a little bit more higher end, because I'm just kind of done with a poor experience with my headphones. So you're looking at like higher end ones and now doing a comparison. Again, the search intent is exactly the same. Like it's more of like that commercial intent. And of course, you've made your decision, and you've chosen a essentially a trustworthy vendor to be able to go through, be able to purchase that. Happy days.
If I may just reiterate what you've said, is that going through a journey which is saying, I've got a problem with my head hurts, my head feels heavy. Headphones are a potential solution. Now I'm going to investigate this different headphones that perhaps that I've already got and why they might be bad and which ones might possibly be better. Then I go through and figure out which ones do I need to pay a lot of money? Do I not need to pay a lot of money? Which ones are worth it? Which ones aren't? Then I've decided to buy, make my purchase on desktop, and the journey is complete.
100%. So it goes all the way from informational to commercial to sort of like transactional intent. Right. And I've just like basically just mapped out all the different types of intent, but really looking back to it, like journeys as a unique as each consumer. This is kind of where, again, it's like moving away from that like answer model, that keywords model, to like, okay, well now we're considering like a whole like topic of like queries. there are so many that is there, and so when we're considering like informational intent, that's really just trying to like further like simplify, like showing results that just give information about a specific term. I didn't talk about it, but navigational intent, like where people are maybe like wanting to actually find something. So you might want to visit a specific website. So, they're on their way to like maybe like a Facebook or something like that. And then of course, like commercial intents, where, people have the intention to buy in the near future and want to use, do some more qualified searching to get some more information. So, like which is the most helpful, which is best, like those kinds of things are really in that kind of commercial intent where it's, qualifying it better. And of course, transactional intent, which is, like typically things where, people can be able to go to these pages, be able to buy. The 4 levels of intent. Pretty basic, but I think I just like want to establish where I'm coming from.
No, I really like it. I mean, that kind of the 4 different intents are incredibly important. And that idea of a journey from information to commercial to maybe navigational and then on to transactional is an incredibly important journey that we forget. And we often aim for these incredibly ambiguous, big volume terms. And perhaps we should be breaking it all down and saying, well, which ones am I actually looking to aim for initially? And now what you're saying, I can see we have a house that's falling apart on The Simpsons, and you've got site structure written on it, which is probably indicative of pretty much every site in the world today, is they all look like this terribly dilapidated Simpsons house falling apart. And it should be built better, and it should be built on the idea of semantics and intent.
Precisely, because in the real world, as you see every day, as I see in a lot of other like SEOs, like most of the time, information is not is unstructured and available in different silos, and understanding the mechanisms of semantic search. We are offered an opportunity to be able to leverage different tools and things like that exist out there, that we can basically take that purchasing journey, that customer journey, and be able to like map out what it will look like with our site structure. So that's really the two concepts that I'm wanting to marry there. So,
genius.
Like when it comes to building sites, so like, often the most questions come from how to structure out sites and what's like both logical and practical and scalable. And, for us, like, it's really important to like be able to now know like how to communicate these ideas. And I think one of the things that is the most challenging for us as an SEO is to be able to communicate these complex ideas very succinctly, and also not take a million hours manually mapping all of this stuff out. So this is sort of now where I'm leading to. So you'll be super familiar with this.
Right. Yeah. Sorry, just to come back very quickly. This comes back to intelligent laziness that Hannah Thorpe was talking about a couple of weeks ago. And I think we all agree, if we can spend less time, be a bit lazy about it, but still come up with the same results, we're all going to be happy. And that's what this is all about. Is that not the case, Nik Ranger?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I work within an agency, and of course, like, we're always trying to get the best results with the most lean amount of time. It's just like the function of any, good engine. Like, it's always working towards, the best efficiency model that it can work around, right?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
No, I'm giving a talk in 2 days, and I'm going to steal that and quote you.
Awesome. So of course, like, Jason, you're super familiar with this. Again, I'm just speaking to anyone who is listening to this, But like when we're like looking at all of this, of course, we've got the knowledge graph, which is the center of the entire construct, and it's just this enormous database of information that basically like enables Google to start providing immediate factual answers, like to different queries and things like that. And of course, as we saw from mine, I didn't really see too many things that were relevant to me, so that maybe is pretty indicative of me doing basically no work to like build any understanding in Google's eyes about who I am. So again, like this is kind of like where it is starting to lead towards. And then of course, like things are then like broken down into ontologies. So they're like ontologies, like they're the formal like representations of how set concepts within like a site and the relationships between those concepts, just to kind of like broadly speak that.
Well, I mean, within a site, you would tend to think of categorization. Yes,
100%. 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, and then of course, like within those ontologies, we've got entities. Like they're very distinct, and like they have their independent like existence within those within those ontologies, and they have like their own little attributes, like characteristics or traits that sort of like make up that entity type.
Right.
And of course. Yeah.
Sorry, I mean, looking at your diagram, you've got a knowledge graph right in the middle, and then you've got lots of ontologies around it, each containing entities, each of which has attributes, which is absolutely delightful diagram. And it does show, I mean, the knowledge graph is Google's understanding of the world. It's a machine readable, in real time encyclopedia that is so massive we can't begin to imagine how big it is. And it's going to end up understanding pretty much everything in the world that's accessible on the web. And you've got the attributes there, and that's what we were talking about right at the beginning. Is little by little, these attributes are going to be appearing next to the entities in those knowledge panels in Google search, increasingly decided by the machine, which means that you have to get this right. So what you're actually talking about fits in incredibly well in a very detailed and very important general SEO sense to what we were talking about at the beginning, what I was talking about with the web facts around your name.
Yeah, I really appreciate that breakdown of it, because I think when we're talking about these different terms, I kind of wanted to like just break it down and just go through and like re-explain what they are and how they function, and how they're related to one another. Because I think when we're talking like when we say like knowledge graph, when we say entity, when we say ontology, when we say semantics and semantic relationships, again, for a lot of people out there, especially coming from an agency, we are not familiar with this kind of terminology. We don't use it in our day-to-day. And of course, if we were to go into a client meeting with this kind of terminology, they basically tell us to get our heads out of the books and just tell us something real. So again, from a conceptual point of view, I think it's so important to understand how this works and how this functions. But again, like how this actually can be applied to things that we like, to the traditional SEO that's, starting to really transform their thinking and methodologies to, again, go from keyword to entity understanding and like how that's going to work for them on a day-to-day basis. Wonderful. So again, like looking at semantics, like that's like the entities and ontologies, like that's the most important like fundamental semantic structure is those two things. And I think like when we're looking at how these will go through, we can look at now looking at like massive keyword lists and considering like, okay, well, how does that sort of translate? Like I understand like for my brand, my business, there are lots of massive ontologies, or maybe just even one or two or a few. Again, like I work on pretty large sites these days. So again, this is really super helpful for me to organize my mind around how I'm going to like, basically proceed with like a internal linking structure. But for your ontology, that could be very much like your entire keyword list, just our keyword list. And within that list, there are so many different things that that are relevant and not relevant, with all varying amounts of different search intent. So now, breaking that down, how do we bridge the gap between what I just said, like between the content and the website? So like I was saying before, I've got a graph here that kind of goes through and explains this a little bit more, but your ontology is essentially like your niche, like keyword research, like, but all of it, all of that list. You haven't really gone through, you haven't clarified it, you haven't broken it down. So again, like, this is now like taking, like, an ontology basically identifies and distinguishes concepts and their relationships. We love that. And now we can like start to form them into taxonomies. Now, taxonomies are essentially just like taking that and organizing them into lists and things like that. Again, terminology, if anyone listening is not familiar with it, that's basically what it is. And
I'm looking at your delightful slide, and it basically says my ontology is a niche keyword research. I've got my list of keywords, then I divide them into informational, commercial, navigational, transactional, and I've done my job.
Yeah, essentially. Now, for a lot of us, we do this manually, right? But again, like, our lovely friends at Wordlift are doing some pretty amazing things. And so we can do this in two ways. We can continue to take out those lists, like qualify them by breaking them down into search intent, and then from there, breaking them down even further and clustering them. Or we can basically use something like this, which is now like understanding like the semantic distance between these terms in the text. So basically, what I've got on here, if no one can see it, Wordlift is a really, really great company that's is doing some really honestly, like, some pretty phenomenal work with machine learning and helping really start to, like, I guess, organize information for your websites using like its massive databases. I'm not explaining this very well, and I know, Jason, you've delved into this a lot more than I have. But
well, in fact, not this part, to be honest. I use Wordlift a lot for the schema markup and for organizing my entities, as you were saying earlier on, thinking, what have I got, and how do I divide them into their different ontologies? And that's fundamentally important. Is what have I got? Where does it belong? And what are its relationships to the other things I've got and the places they belong? That's what Wordlift does incredibly well. But this particular part, no, I haven't really looked at it. So please do explain.
Yeah, this is pretty new, I think, from Andrea Volpini and the team at Wordlift. And I've been having a lot of fun going through and being able to test it for different cases over the last few months. Hence why I'm really excited to sort of like talk about this today. But essentially, like, with large keyword lists, this is a way to basically just go through and be able to classify and automate the split out of the intent. Pretty cool, right? Yep. So, like, say for example, I have just like dog, and again, it's very, very broad. So many different variations of like its related keywords to do with, like, you know, the primary topic. Dog, right? Now this is going through and understanding, like, okay, like, if for this keyword, you know, dog beds, like, generally this is like a transactional, like, intent, like, you know, and you can be able to replicate this, put it into the SERP, and you know, see that, like, oh, if I put in dog beds, it's not about information about, it's actually like people want to buy that. That makes a ton of sense. Now that basically just takes that and then just does that automatically. This took literally like maybe a minute to do, and it just did, like, you know, 300 different queries.
And what's interesting there, in fact, is that dog beds is not immediately, obviously, a transactional query with transactional intent. But what these machines do incredibly well is use the corpus of text around it and the context and the other related keywords to understand which ones are most likely to be the transactional ones. So just looking at the words and thinking, oh, I can probably make this up as I go along because I'm super smart and I know how people think, is probably not a great way of doing it, because these machines have got loads more data, loads more information, loads more context than you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, with these labels, with these classifications, the better you define those labels, like the more that it gets right. I did a lot of different tests, which were, which absolutely failed and broke like Andrea's beautiful spreadsheet. But again, like this is super interesting concept to be able to have a list of keywords, be able to put in different variables. It goes through and understands the relationship between those terms or queries, or basically like literally anything else that you want to be able to go through and be able to test and show what that relationship is from its understanding. So this is again where like I'm thinking, my gosh, this kind of work would take hours. Now it's like 2 minutes. Crazy, right?
So in fact, you being lazy, intelligently lazy, if I might say, is actually Andrea Volpini from Wordlift and his team being incredibly hardworking. So you're lazy
100%.
is they're working.
Yes.
How lovely. Poor Andrea.
Yeah. But like I have so much respect for him and his whole team, like doing this kind of testing and things like that. And to be honest, like there are, there's other people out there that are building similar tools to this. Like I know Data Chaz from Twitter, like he's built out like in Google Colab, like Python models that do something very similar to this. And I've had a look at those, and again, like putting in things into
So sorry to drop another name. Authoritas have got a great thing where they're working out intent according to the rich SERP elements that are found on a page, which is actually a really nice, smart way of doing it. So with Authoritas, I'm using them for the SERP API, which is absolutely brilliant, which is why their logo is on that thing at the beginning, because they're giving me that data about Webfacts and about the trusted sources that Google has for the knowledge panels. And one thing they do throw back is this intent based on the SERP features that appear on any given search query.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that we have such a rich community, right? We have such a wonderful, rich community of like really smart, intelligent, and very generous people wanting to share what they know and just put information out there and just see what people do with this. And again, this is why I've sort of like taken these concepts and tried to marry them up together and be able to do this.
But that's exactly what you're doing, is taking incredible insights that you've worked on your own, and you're sharing it with everybody to see what they do with it. So you're a very kind and generous person too.
Oh, thanks.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Well, I think so I've done a little bit of testing with this. Because I thought like, oh, this is really great, but like at the end of the day, like conceptual to practical, there is a million different things that can either go wrong, or there's just a lot of learning that comes from doing that sort of process. So this is actually something that I've gone through and tested with I think 2 clients now, where I've basically gone through and done this methodology of having like my keyword list and being able to like split it up by intent. And then from those different intents, map out what that's then going to look like. And
sorry, just to interrupt you, Daniel quickly just asked, how can you access that tool that you were talking about from Wordlift, which is a spreadsheet? Answer is tag Andrea Volpini, CyberAndy, or @WordliftIT on Twitter. Ask him about it, and he will, I'm sure, gladly share information and insights and potentially the tool.
Yeah, and I definitely made sure that I had his AOK to speak about this publicly
right.
before I did this, of course. But yeah, massive shout outs to him and his team. So
I mean, it's not public, so that's why I said potentially share the tool with you.
Yes.
But he will certainly share his knowledge. He's a very generous person for that. And we just got a clap from, I think that was Anton. He's got the clap, the clapometer going. Anyway, off we go. Keep going.
That's awesome. So again, like, taking this, I wanted to be able to go through and be able to test what that would look like. So, taking like an ability to be able to very quickly look at large keyword lists, be able to split them down and separate them out again and again and again, and basically use that as a methodology to be able to start to filter out and qualify these lists, so that you're now left with smaller and smaller but more topically relevant clusters of different queries. So again, this is like where we can now go through and be able to test this with applying this to maybe like a different site structure. So like I'm in the process of doing quite a few site migrations, and it was with one of my clients' wishes that we go through and basically organize their site structure in a way that's a lot more meaningful. This was a bit of a task because the site structure that we looked at basically was not organized with any human readable text. It's basically numbers. And again, like this was like a bit of a nightmare to sort of look at this and be like, well, you know, how do we go through? How do we organize you know, all of this content? But also like have a little bit of freedom as to like, okay, well, like we can kind of like create a structure that does make a little bit more sense. So let's use this methodology to see about doing this a little bit quicker. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, well, you know, we'll just sort of like, you know, put that aside. So yeah, again, like this is something that we've gone through and been able to do. So
right, and in this slide, I actually see a graphic which is a traditional organogram of site structure with a home page with the categories and then the subcategories and the page at the bottom, and it's all color coded according to intent.
Yes, it is, except I'm now just realizing that when I made this, I didn't make it with the same types of colors that I used. So maybe ignore the colors for this one. Anyway, but that's not relevant.
I mean, the idea is that, I mean, I understood looking at it that you were, I hope, trying to organize it, or
yes,
looking at that color coding to show intent. And it's actually a really nice view of a site architecture, of looking at kind of what kind of intent am I looking at with this page, and it would help me then focus on what I need to say on that page, what information I need to give, how I need to address the user's problem or question on that page to satisfy their intent, which is beautiful.
Oh, yeah, yes. Yeah, thank you.
I think
yeah, when starting out and you know, creating this from you know, basically clusters of keywords, like I think I don't want to say the word rule, because I think that, you know, people sort of their ears prick up and they're like, oh, okay, we have to do this and only this. Everything in SEO has caveats, and you know, this is why it depends is like the most used phrase in our you know, in SEO. So again, when we're thinking about web like site architecture, like it's really about how information is organized and prioritized around your site. So like navigationally, like using breadcrumbs, like with the menu structure, like URLs, sitemaps, like they really do go through and to be able to help search engines understand your site structure. Now, when I'm saying this, like again, like in this particular case, we used it. We've used it in two different ways. One was changing the URL structure, and the other one was actually using like this to be able to model out like our internal link structure. So that's basically just helping to like really emphasize like which pages are more important around your website, and that's really sort of you know, quite good. So when basically taking those keywords and organizing it, I wanted to kind of have like, you know, some very clear signals that we were always going to have like being built out onto these pages. So again, like metadata, super important. The heading structure, at least the H1 to have like that keyword in there. Having a primary keyword associated with every single page is so important. Because that primary page basically is a really great way to make sure like there is a purpose for this page, and I know that I'm not going to be cannibalizing it with anything else, because that intent is pretty clear. It's very well defined, and that one primary keyword has its own set of like semantically related like secondary keywords that are also kind of like there you know, in the background, you know, giving it a little bit of credence like to that to that entity, to that topic. So again, like having that, having one like main topic or keyword associated with a page is pretty important. And again, just like having that in the meta title, the H1, having that mentions in the body paragraph and making that really nice and succinct. And again, with our URL change, we just also put that keyword into the URL as well, because like from testing, I think we can see like some good impacts from actually putting the keyword in the URL.
Well, I mean, I would argue whether Google likes it or not doesn't actually matter. As a human being, I like to see the words that I'm actually associating with a page in the URL. So I would always suggest do it just because it's good for humans. Whether it's good or not for Google is, great if it is. If it isn't, who cares? It doesn't matter because I've been doing it for the humans. And one other thing I'd say is that idea, I mean, the keyword, one keyword, main keyword per page, I would actually suggest as well, writing a sentence that represents that word within the context of the intent you're looking at would be an incredibly good exercise to help you to really focus and make sure that you don't kind of cross your wires across different pages. And it would really support your delightful color coding. Yeah,
absolutely. And like writing out the sentence, like, having that in like that being able to be mentioned in like the body paragraph text is quite perfect, because like generally speaking, like once you've selected that, then you can sort of figure out what your supporting content is going to be around that. Like your supporting content are like, your terms that are around your topic. So like, questions that people would be able to ask, like, for example, if you're selling a particular product, like, then does this come in different sizes? Like, or does it come in like, different types, like, like of materials, like all kinds of different variations of like supporting, like queries around that one main, topic. So, again, this is sort of like now starting to think about like, okay, what is the intent of this page, and like what are the kinds of things that are relevant to that, and like from doing those qualified lists, you kind of have a really good idea of like what is kind of like within that pool to choose from. So this is where it can go. And I think I go through and explain this a little bit more in like with this slide. So so I basically have a graph that is explaining my words to audio listeners. So again, like when we're thinking about this, we've got like that nice topic cluster. Like I've got a very clear transactional intent. We did this for an e-commerce store, so it was really pretty easy to be able to look at this stuff. So we've got our transactional page, and that's like one that we're wanting people to go through and be able to buy. But of course, 98% of the time, people don't go out and look for that. They're like, scoping out that. Thinking back to our earlier slides. So having internal links like that are like both informational or commercial sort of intent is a really good way of saying like, yes, these are all relevant to one another, but I'm going to have them internally link to these main pages. So we sort of like thought when we're building this out, again, not going too crazy, because but just having like a bit of like just having 4 pages. So like if I have a transactional like page, I'm going to have 3 pages of different like types of intent that all link back to that. So that's a really nice way of like making sure that every single page has been heroed in some way. And again, because like we can be able to see that semantically that they are within the same like entity relationship to one another, it's going to make it a lot more likely that when Google starts to see or be able to crawl and be able to understand this, and it starts to reward us, well, all of that is going to start to become rewarded. Like that's really the logic, that because like assessing where priority goes, like search engines are rewarding you by indexing favorably like your transactional content, and then prioritizing by creating content and then internally linking these to the transactional pages. We're really wanting to see some really good relationships. And again, this is just like a really nice way of approaching this and just kind of like breaking it down and just being like, all right, like we need to have some structure here.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've got a topic cluster with transactional pages, and each transactional page has supporting commercial and informational pages that potentially push traffic people up from those pages because they don't necessarily search for transactional stuff, and also helping Google group things. Machines like patterns, and machines like groups, and Google, is a machine.
Yes, absolutely.
If you didn't know it. Sorry, Nick.
No. I know. I love you adding your thoughts here. I really appreciate that.
And now we're back to dogs again. Dog supplies, dry dog food, and wet dog food.
Hence why I was like, I'm like, a lot of this I'm going to be using because I own a dog. But again, like for audio listeners, I've just got another slide here that's basically just breaking this down with an example. So if you're really not sure of what I'm talking about, this basically goes through and says like, okay, like with dry dog food, for example, if that's like my like a transactional page, like it's a subcategory page from maybe like dog supplies, what are the types of related supporting contents do I want to have, like to be able to internally link that, which is like recognized as part of that entity. So, is dry dog food better for dogs' teeth? That's a nice little like commercial type intent to be able to link to that. Or how to get your dogs to eat dry foods. Or what age can puppies eat dry dog foods, as like that kind of like scoping of the discovery. So again, it doesn't necessarily have any commercial interest, but again, from a discovery, like I'm just wanting to know some quick answers about that because it's super relevant. And if I am now like, okay, like actually I see on that page some really, really great content on that. There's internal links that point me back to that main category page. It makes a ton of sense. But again, it's just approaching this kind of concept in a methodical kind of way of looking at this stuff. Yeah.
Wonderful. No. If I may just paint a small picture next to the slides, is when Nik is trying to read what's written on her screen, she has to peer at it very, very closely. It makes me feel slightly better about the fact that I do that every time I'm giving a presentation. And I always thought, how shameful, but now I feel slightly less ashamed of myself.
Yeah, sorry. My eyesight at this hour of the morning is not great.
It's like that for me all day long. So, okay, I do now feel a little bit more ashamed. 1 o'clock in the morning for Nick, eyesight's going. Yeah. What's happening next?
Yeah. So again, like now, like you've like let's say like hypothetically you've gone through, you've been able to implement that, or you're wanting to sort of assess your site and sort of see what it looks like at the moment. I really love Screaming Frog. I use it like all the time, and I think that this is a really, really great way just to kind of like get a sense of like, okay, like with my pages that are really important to me, how well is my internal link structure and I guess internal link structure actually look when we're considering this on the site. So this is like with the force directed crawl diagram. It's up there in the top menu. So after you've crawled it, you can be able to now have a look at a nice visual overlay of how your pages look from an authoritative perspective. So for this, like, yeah, I've just kind of like written here, Screaming Frog, it can be configured, and you can use Ahrefs as a way to also like give yourself their ratings as to how well these pages are done. So how many inlinks are like, how many internal links are pointing to these pages, how many external links are pointing to these pages as well. It's just a really, really nice way of consolidating this pretty quickly.
Right, okay, and you can crawl it, and Screaming Frog obviously knows the internal site, and it can give you the relative authority of pages within the site. You add Ahrefs to the mix, and it can pull in the external signals. Then you get a really good view of quite how powerful, in inverted commas, a page might be.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
So I was re-explaining what you just said, just to clarify it in my own brain, to be honest.
No, I love that. I love that.
Ooh, assessing performance, Google Analytics and Search Console, screenshot of a search console and an analytics with the data, the words blacked out so we can't see who it is?
Yeah. So in Google Analytics, okay, so just like being able to assess the performance of these pages, it's good to sort of like have a bit of a benchmark of where you were before and where you are after the fact. So in Google Analytics, I like to look at your landing pages by page view and just sort of take those landing pages and see in Search Console now to view all the keywords that Google has associated with those pages. So when we've done this, like we've seen like a nice little uptick, or it's just kind of like remained a little bit the same, but in Search Console, it's given us a little bit more information about like how search engines are interpreting these pages. So in Search Console, what we want to see is like, you know, keywords are that of what Google identifies as your as the keywords that it's starting to see about those pages. So again, thinking back to like you know, picking out your primary keywords and your secondary keywords, you can be able to see what that looks like there. And again, like this is actually a page where it has been applied, and it's really, really interesting because like the primary keyword is there, and we were super happy about it, but it's actually our secondary keyword that actually had a better click-through rate. so go figure. But it's really, really great because search engines have gone through and be able to see these pages and basically said like this is the most relevant. And the way that we started to see this was the secondary keywords started to like, you know, start to rank for that. And, you know, it just took a little bit of time to get there. But now we've been able to like, you know, hear our primary keyword, it's been really quite nice. So again, you can get a page that's quite successful that ranks really well for your secondary keywords with less volume. You know, it still gets page views, impressions, and traffic, clicks, and click-through rate, and essentially like ROI, because you know, it's still going through and it's still relevant because it's still within that entity. So you know, either way, it's like a nice little win.
Groovy. And the next one?
Yes. All right. So this is now like getting into the caveats.
Right. Okay. We've got the caveat. It depends. If you're looking to change URL strings and redirect, this part isn't for everybody. Oh, is it scary?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I actually had to put this in there because I was talking to not a client, but actually a lead. And when I was going through this and just sort of like talking conceptually, I had to catch up with her maybe like 3 days later. Oh no, sorry, not 3 days. It was like a week later. Time is anyway. And what she had taken from like just like a quick little throw out kind of like a bit of like advice around this sort of stuff was she went through and like basically just changed all of the URLs and added in what she thought was a better keyword into her URL and then redirected to that URL. So massive caveat, if you're looking at wanting to, you know, sort of incorporate this into your site, when it comes to doing redirects and things like that, like have a look at the performance of those pages. If there's never really historically been any uptick, or it's just really not taken off at all, then like, you know, like you can do it. But I feel like just looking at the metadata first, looking at the H1 first, looking at you know, just optimizing the content on that page, really making sure that it actually matches the search intent and adds value to the user. I mean, the content, people like to jazz it up, but like at the end of the day, like if it's not meaningful, if it's kind of hard to read, or it's just kind of bled over like a really long sort of like winded thing, and it doesn't answer the question very succinctly, chances are people aren't going to like that experience either. So I think I'm putting this in there as, you know, don't take this and just go and like redirect all of your URLs to things that you think look more pretty. Because again, like I think in having internal links are just as powerful, if not more powerful. So
right. Well, what I hear there is several things. One of which is reorganizing a site is a major undertaking. Don't do it just off the bat because you think you can get away with it. Get professional help. And secondly, the idea that you can just imagine how it should be organized off the top of your head because you're some kind of genius who's understood your entire audience and market instinctively is probably rubbish, is almost certainly rubbish. You need supporting data to be able to actually know what you have to do. Thirdly, if it isn't going to give you a big payback, you're probably best just optimizing, improving what you already have and making sure it answers these intents. Even without moving it, it's still going to bring you great benefit. And the added benefit from actually moving it is a question of data, a question of resources, a question of, you know, do you really want to kill your business? Because moving a site, migrating a site can kill your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And
that was a good caveat, that was.
Yeah, and very well succinctly summarized.
Right.
And that really lends very nicely to the next slide, which is basically, like key problems with site architecture, like layouts and again, site migrations and things like that. Like when people make this stuff, like they're already starting with a bit of a flawed logic and just sort of like have just layer upon layer upon layer. And when you're going through, you're like, oh my gosh, like to be able to even just find like the product page at the end, like I had to click like 6 times, like just kind of absurd. Again, just trying to like, you know, make it really, really nice and simple. And, you know, like it's just the things I see all the time is like either just no consideration to SEO or scalability, or it's completely over-engineered to the fact that, you know, to the point where it's just kind of almost like strangled. So
right. Well, one thing about scalability is my ex-wife is a graphic designer, and she talks about infinitely adaptable. But it's the same thing about scalability. And basically, it's infinitely scalable in that anything you want to add to your site should immediately have in your brain a place it goes totally logically. Yeah. If it doesn't, if you think, oh, if I start doing that in a year's time, where will I put it on the site? And there's nowhere for you to put it on the site, your site's probably not going to scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, you know, I'm sure you see it, like I see it all the time, like with newer sites, they start for like 20 pages. And once they get to 100 pages, they're like, I have no idea how to handle or organize this information anymore. Like if you're conducting like a site migration and looking to change your URL structure from like flat to silo or content merging or merging sites together, it's really hard to know what direction to go in that makes sense from both a user's perspective and like one that's easily accessible and understandable for search engines. So most are either not thought through, and yeah, it's just kind of like a little bit of a misconception. I think that the CMS ties the URL structure to how the nav menu is going to look, and you know, that's a little bit of a fiction there. I think like you know, you don't have to have like if well,
the nav menu doesn't necessarily reflect the structure of the site itself, the categorization, the ontologies, as you said, and I think that's an important distinction to make. You can have a structure of site and actually have the nav menu represent the site slightly differently depending on your users, your audience's preferences and needs and priorities. Whereas the site structure is there to organize the content so that you can maintain it, Google can understand it, and that if a human being comes in and tries to change the URL themselves by hand, theoretically, if you've done a good job, they can just change it by hand and they will probably find category name, change it for another category name, you still come across something you would expect.
Yeah, absolutely.
I might be overdoing it now, actually, but there you go.
Yeah, well, you know, for humans, like to navigate a site and you know, make sure that like it makes a lot of sense to have a structure where they see a category and then they see subpages. Like just because it lives in the way of the navigation doesn't necessarily mean how the URL structure has to be. So
brilliant. Yeah. And you want to organize your site structure according to semantics. We've got 1.5 minutes left before we hit the hour. That's been absolutely amazing. And oh, thank you for your time was the last slide. I made a great guess that was the last slide. Thank you for your time, Nik Ranger, at 1 o'clock in the morning in Australia.
Thank you so much. Well, it's now 2. If you want to be able to find me after this, you can find me on Twitter at Nik Ranger SEO or on LinkedIn or at Studio Hawk. So either one of those, I will figure out where to put these slides. And Jason, thank you so much.
We'll definitely have them on the podcast site for the people who were listening and not watching. This was an experiment to see what happened. If anybody listens to the podcast and thinks, didn't understand a word of it, that was completely impossible to follow, please do ping me on Twitter and tell me rubbish idea, didn't work out, and I will accept all responsibility and apologize to everybody publicly next week, and we'll never do this again. Thank you very much for an amazing presentation. I really, really enjoyed it. Next week, we've got Teodora Petkova, who's going to be talking about weaving the web of people, content, and data, which is a really, really complicated title, and it could go horrendously, philosophically, interestingly, rabbit-holey. And I'm looking forward to that with great looking forwardness. Thank you very much, Nick. A quick goodbye to end the show. Thank you, Nick, and thank you to the audience, audio and video.
Thanks, you so
Peter
much.
Mead. Thank you so much, Jason and Nick, says Peter Mead. We love you, Peter. Love you too, Nick. That was wonderful. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.